What would you do if one morning you realized your brand new $78,000 boat had vanished from the private dock behind your lakefront home, and by the time you reached the shoreline, the only thing greeting you was the echo of rippling water? That horrifying image is exactly what I faced not too long ago. My name is Mike, and I'm a 38-year-old software developer who decided, after a bitter divorce, to relocate from the bustling tech scene of California to a seemingly peaceful gated community in Tampa, Florida. Yes, it's sunny, it's warm, it's a place where people go to restart their lives after heartbreak. Little did I know I was entering a neighborhood ruled by a homeowners association led by Patricia Wilkins, also known as the notorious HOA Karen. She didn't just disrupt my tranquility, she turned it upside down and triggered a chain of events that ultimately led to an FBI raid nobody saw coming. I'd bought this place for the serenity of the lake, for the chance to fish in the early mornings without the city smog, for the freedom of docking my new Chaparral boat on my own property. The house itself had 3 bedrooms and a charming backyard, but that private dock was the most significant draw. The idea of drifting with a cold beer on weekend afternoons felt almost therapeutic. Right after I moved, I invested in the vessel I'd dreamt of for years. A gleaming white leisure boat with elegant blue trim, a pricey escape from my past. For a few weeks, life was idyllic. I'd handle coding tasks remotely during weekdays. On weekends, I'd bask in the glow of Florida sunshine, reading novels out on the water. At times, I even thought this was the best decision I'd ever made. Then came the abrupt knock on my door. It was a Saturday morning, around 9, and I had barely settled at the kitchen table with a cup of hot coffee. The sharp rapping at my front entrance echoed through the foyer. When I opened it, a woman stood there, wearing designer sunglasses perched atop her flawlessly styled hair. Everything about her radiated control. She introduced herself as Patricia Wilkins, the HOA president for Lakeside Estate. At first, she pretended to welcome me, that artificial grin stretched across her face. But the facade crumbled the moment she demanded to know why my mailbox was an unauthorized shade of white instead of the approved eggshell tone. My immediate thought was, "Are you serious?" I'd never lived in an HOA community before. I'd heard rumors about how picky they could be, but I was unprepared for such a trivial complaint. She pointed to the guidelines, citing Section 6.3 with surprising gusto. Then she informed me she'd be emailing me a violation notice. Before I had the chance to speak, she turned and strutted away, leaving me and my coffee in stunned silence. I tried telling myself that perhaps this was just some overzealous sense of neighborhood pride. Maybe she was meticulous about details. However, within days, I started receiving a barrage of violation notices, each one more exasperating than the last. Grass height, off by a fraction of an inch. A bird feeder in the backyard, disallowed because it apparently encouraged wildlife. My garbage bin sat visible from the street for an extra few hours one Tuesday. Every minuscule oversight became a written warning with a potential fine attached. At first, I complied as best I could because I didn't want unnecessary conflict. I'd just uprooted my life to find a calmer existence. Yet each notice made me feel more like a prisoner in my own home. Then I met Tom Reynolds, a retired police officer living next door. He was a gruff yet friendly man in his early 60s, forever clad in fishing gear, who offered me a beer one evening and listened to my complaints. He confessed that nearly everyone in the neighborhood had suffered under Patricia's rule. She had a knack for enforcing obscure clauses in the community's bylaws. According to Tom, she used regulations to bend people to her will, especially newcomers, who didn't fall in line. Still, I hoped that by obeying the guidelines, she might lose interest. So I meticulously measured my lawn, repainted my mailbox, and removed the bird feeder. I even invited her over for coffee, thinking we could find some mutual ground. Big mistake. She spent the entire visit pacing through my living room, casting judgment on every corner, every paint color, every decorative piece. Before leaving, she turned, offered a frosty smile, and said that in lakeside estates, strict adherence to the rules was what preserved property values. Her parting words dripped with a threat that if I wasn't a team player, there'd be consequences. Fast forward to the first HOA meeting I attended. It took place in an unremarkable community center that smelled of stale coffee. Patricia sat at the head of a long table flanked by her loyal supporters. Everyone else seemed wary and exhausted by her presence. The big agenda item that day concerned a new regulation forbidding any boat over 20 feet to remain docked at a private residence for more than 24 hours. My heart dropped. The entire reason I bought this property was for lake access. Keeping a boat on your own dock was historically permitted under the original covenant. Patricia looked around the room, flashing that smug grin, and declared that large vessels ruined the neighborhood's aesthetic. I couldn't sit quietly. With a shaky voice, I explained that my chaparral was an integral part of why I purchased that house. A private dock was part of the property rights guaranteed in the original documents. Some attendees murmured agreement, and Tom, the ex-officer, stood and openly accused Patricia of pushing her agenda without genuine community support. The vote, surprisingly, did not go her way. It lost by 1 vote, but I noticed her whisper something to a timid woman named Jenny, who served as the HOA secretary, before she left the room. That look Patricia cast at me was ice cold. She didn't need to voice her anger. It radiated from her posture. At the time, I felt relieved, confident that we'd thwarted her attempt to restrict private boating. I had no inkling how far she'd go to get her way. The real bombshell came the very next morning. I woke up, took my coffee onto the back porch, and stared in disbelief. The boat was gone. The water lapped quietly against the posts of the empty dock. Confusion and dread swirled inside me. I sprinted down to the waterfront, hoping it had maybe come loose. Yet there were no signs of drifting ties or forced entry. Nothing was amiss, except for the glaring absence of my prized vessel. Shaking, I dialed the police. While waiting for their arrival, I caught sight of Patricia striding confidently down my driveway. Crisp linen suit and that same folder of papers she always seemed to carry. She informed me, in front of the responding officer, that the HOA had legally impounded the boat due to a newly passed emergency bylaw banning all watercraft above 20 feet from private docks. She showed the officer an official-looking document with the association's letterhead, featuring signatures from her trusted board members. The officer frowned, clearly unsure how to handle a situation that appeared more civil than criminal. In mere moments, I realized she had staged an emergency meeting after the official vote had failed, likely forging minutes and gathering her cronies to push through a new regulation. It was so brazen, so bold, that I couldn't wrap my head around it. She smirked. She stated that my expensive boat now belonged to the community until I paid whatever fines they saw fit. I was horrified. She even mentioned that she'd arranged to use it for an upcoming board retreat. I demanded to see proof or an official warrant of seizure, but she just gave me that condescending smile, flicking her perfectly manicured nails, and told me I could take it up in civil court. Then she sashayed away, pleased with her orchestrated power play, leaving me speechless on the dock. Tom came over almost immediately upon hearing the commotion. He was furious, but not entirely surprised. He warned that Patricia had done similar stunts to others over smaller assets, garden statues, vintage cars, even recreational vehicles. But nobody had the resources to fight her in a prolonged legal battle. She was a real estate agent, apparently adept at forging official-looking documents, and rumored to have unscrupulous connections. However, Tom said he would do whatever it took to help me. That evening, we started strategizing. We called a few contacts Tom still had in local law enforcement. Yet the policeman who responded earlier confirmed that the matter seemed purely civil. The HOA, on paper, had the authority to fine or remove items that were in violation, assuming they had documented approval. It was ridiculous, but these neighborhoods can sometimes enforce rules that override standard property laws if the owners have agreed to it in the covenant. Feeling utterly helpless, I drove to the community marina. Sure enough, there was my chaparral, moored in one of the larger slips. I watched from a distance while Patricia, wearing an expression of absolute self-satisfaction, showed it off to two board members, talking about how the association would decide its fate. My blood boiled, but I realized marching down there and confronting her would be pointless. I needed something bigger. I needed evidence or some higher authority to step in. As I headed back to my car, I noticed an envelope in my mailbox with Patricia's name on it, but my address listed as the recipient. That's how I stumbled upon her IRS notice, a formal letter mentioning a potential audit triggered by suspicious deposits in her accounts. My moral compass was torn about opening mail not addressed to me, but I reasoned that it landed in my mailbox and might hold the key to exposing her. So I took a deep breath and carefully opened it. The letter indicated unreported sums totaling nearly $200,000 over the past 2 years. The IRS wanted explanations. The language was direct and threatening in that way only the Internal Revenue Service manages. I made a photocopy before sealing it back up. Then a spark of an idea flared. Was Patricia engaged in something bigger than petty HOA power plays? If she was hiding illicit income, maybe that was fueling her aggressive behavior. She had the audacity to confiscate my boat. Maybe she was confident no one would challenge her because she'd been successfully dodging scrutiny for years. I shared this revelation with Tom. His eyes lit up. He'd suspected that something about Patricia's lifestyle didn't match her official income. She drove a new Mercedes, wore expensive jewelry, traveled abroad, and had recently paid off a huge mortgage. Tom introduced me to Marco, a local accountant who specialized in forensic bookkeeping. Over a few days, we pored over publicly available HOA records, analyzing line items for maintenance paid to vague companies with names like Lakeside Services or Florida Coastal Maintenance. None of these firms had legitimate addresses or valid phone numbers. Meanwhile, Patricia's personal finances soared at a rate that didn't match her reported earnings. Marco suspected money laundering or embezzlement from the HOA fund. However, we needed more conclusive proof. While digging deeper, I decided to chat, discreetly, with other neighbors who had experienced Patricia's intimidation. Many had horror stories of how she'd hammered them with violations, demanded outrageous sums to remedy the issues, then confiscated high-value property or pressured them to sell their homes cheaply. It was always orchestrated with menacing legal letters that used specific HOA clauses. One couple told me they lost a vintage car that had been parked in their garage after Patricia convinced the board it was an unauthorized commercial vehicle. Another said she nearly lost her grandmother's heirloom jewelry due to security concerns raised by the association. Most of these neighbors left Lakeside Estates rather than engage in a costly fight. It became clear that Patricia effectively ran a mini-dictatorship, but none had pinned anything definitively criminal on her, beyond intimidation. Then we discovered something more ominous. Tom, rummaging through old case files from his police career, found a name: Miguel Rodriguez. This individual had been suspected of trafficking stolen art and antiques through Florida ports, and Patricia's late husband had apparently been questioned about links to that ring years earlier but passed away before charges were filed. According to Tom, that case went cold. If Patricia had continued or expanded her husband's dealings, it could explain the large influx of money in her accounts. Our speculation turned more credible when we caught wind of rumors that Patricia occasionally boasted about international connections for moving valuable items. My boat, expensive as it was, might have been just another token to her, something she could flip quickly to keep her laundering pipeline flowing. That same week, as I was walking around the marina, pretending to check on other vessels, I bumped into Jenny, the nervous HOA secretary. She pulled me aside. "I don't agree with what Patricia is doing," she whispered shakily, "but I depend on this job. She told me if I leak anything, she'll make sure I end up homeless." Jenny was trembling, terrified of the potential fallout, but she had moral qualms about forging board meeting minutes and helping Patricia. She admitted that the entire impound fiasco with my boat was done without real consensus. The emergency meeting was bogus, as I already suspected. She even hinted that Patricia was about to sell my chaparral to a buyer in Miami for $95,000, nearly a 20% markup from my purchase price. That revelation nearly made me see red, but it also prompted a new plan. If Patricia had such a buyer lined up, maybe I could track that transaction. Marco, Tom, and I reasoned that if we could link the sale to her suspicious shell companies, or better yet, to Rodriguez, we could deliver a compelling case to law enforcement. Perhaps that would be enough to push this from a civil matter into a serious criminal investigation. I reached out to an old college friend named Ryan who lived in Miami. He was intrigued by the story and agreed to pose as a potential buyer, offering to pay $100,000 in cash. No paperwork, no questions. If Patricia bit that bait and mentioned her existing arrangement with Rodriguez, we'd have a direct line of evidence tying her to illicit activity. Sure enough, Ryan set up a meeting at the marina with Patricia. He wore a hidden microphone supplied by Tom's old police contacts, while I monitored the feed from a discreet vantage point. Patricia strutted in, wearing another chic outfit, not suspecting a thing. She bragged openly about having connections who specialized in moving high-end property. She described how easy it was to confiscate items from naive homeowners who disregarded the HOA's rules. I listened, appalled, as she admitted to forging documents, forcing out new residents, and then profiting from quick sales. When Ryan pressed for details, she mentioned Rodriguez by name, calling him her go-to guy for clearing merchandise. My heart pounded. We had her on record linking the stolen boat to a known smuggler. We compiled everything: Patricia's confessions, the forged documents we'd uncovered, the suspicious HOA finances, the IRS letter, and the new evidence of potential links to stolen goods. Tom contacted the FBI. Special Agent David Chen took an interest because Rodriguez was already on their radar for bigger crimes, including trafficking valuable artifacts. Agent Chen was cautious, emphasizing that they needed undeniable proof before launching a raid. Rodriguez had slipped through law enforcement's fingers multiple times. If we could catch them in the act of finalizing an illegal transaction, it would seal the case. My boat was apparently scheduled to be transferred soon to a private dock on the south end of the lake, where it would be loaded onto a trailer for transport. That was the night the FBI planned to swoop in. There was one complication. Patricia, in the meantime, must have smelled something fishy, because she tripled her harassment campaign against me. She tried to file phony liens on my property, claimed I had illegally modified my own fence, and even arranged for my electricity to be cut off for 3 days. Still, I pressed on, determined not to let her see me sweat. Meanwhile, the hidden GPS device I'd placed on the chaparral indicated that she'd already moved it from the marina to a remote part of the lake, presumably preparing for the final handoff. Tom and I discreetly tailed a transport truck heading toward that secluded cove, but we stayed back, letting our technology do the close work. We had Agent Chen on speed dial, updating him with the location data from the tracker. Late one evening, after midnight, the GPS showed my boat being moved. A black van was parked near the dock. Through binoculars, I recognized the heavy-set man who matched the old file photos of Rodriguez. My pulse hammered in my ears. Tom parked his pickup at a vantage point about 300 yards away, while the FBI attempted to get their tactical team in position. Then, a glitch. Agent Chen texted me that the operation was temporarily delayed. They had to confirm additional backup. I watched in horror as Patricia stepped out of her Mercedes, holding some kind of flat, rectangular package. A painting? Possibly an artifact. Rodriguez was pacing, looking impatient. The deal was about to go down in real time, and the FBI was not yet in place. I had a fallback plan that might stall them. As a software developer, I'd previously set up remote IoT controls on my boat so I could monitor systems, activate or disable components from my phone. The system ran on a dedicated cellular connection, separate from the main battery. Quietly, I opened the control interface. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the surge of adrenaline. The moment Rodriguez climbed onto the boat with Patricia's lackey, presumably to check out the interior and confirm the item was in good condition, I hit a button labeled Emergency Override. Immediately, the horn blared at full volume. Strobe lights flashed from every corner of the vessel's deck. You could see the dazzling lights all the way from the service road. That unexpected eruption of noise threw everyone into panic. Rodriguez snapped his head around as if expecting a SWAT team to appear from the darkness. He hopped off the boat, yelling at Patricia about a setup. She frantically tried to shut off the alarm, but without the master code it wouldn't stop. Her minion tried disconnecting the wires, yet the system had a backup battery. Meanwhile, Tom called Agent Chen, breathless, to say, "They're about to scatter. Hurry!" Within minutes, we saw headlights approaching from both sides of the narrow road. Several unmarked SUVs screeched to a halt, and armed agents burst out. It was chaos. Rodriguez attempted to drive the van away, but the FBI had blocked the exit with spiked strips. He stepped out, hands raised, while cursing Patricia for leading him into a trap. She tried scrambling into her Mercedes, but I, from a distance, tapped another command that locked her doors remotely. She tugged the handle, looking more and more like a cornered animal, until an agent pulled her out and pinned her against the hood. The entire sting lasted less than 5 minutes. It was absolutely surreal. Watching that thoroughly orchestrated meltdown felt like justice incarnate. The FBI retrieved a stash of stolen artwork from the back of Rodriguez's van, including a Renaissance painting rumored to be worth over $3 million. Patricia shrieked, denying everything, accusing the HOA board of conspiring against her, claiming I was some hacker who had entrapped her. But the recorded evidence from Ryan's microphone was clear. She had implicated herself, and Rodriguez, in a whole array of crimes, from fraud to fencing stolen goods. The stash in the van alone was enough to lock them away. In the aftermath, the boat was returned to me once the FBI finished gathering forensic evidence. I spent hours cleaning it because various people had trampled through it in the commotion. Still, I felt a thrill of relief just knowing it was mine again, safe and sound. I learned that Patricia's immediate charges included theft, forgery, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. There were rumors the list would grow as investigators delved deeper into her finances and connections to smuggling networks. Rodriguez was apparently linked to a broader ring that spanned multiple states and even reached international venues. The next HOA meeting was a sight to behold. Instead of Patricia presiding, federal agents handed out subpoenas. Neighbors who once cowered in fear came forward to testify, brandishing old violation notices that Patricia had used as intimidation tactics. Jenny, the timid secretary, broke down in tears while giving a statement about the repeated forgery of board minutes. She confessed that Patricia had forced her to rubber stamp all manner of false documents. Freed from Patricia's threats, she revealed that tens of thousands of dollars had been funneled into shell accounts every month. With Jenny's testimony, the entire scheme became undeniable. Meanwhile, Tom was practically hailed as a local hero for his role in unmasking the tyranny that had plagued Lakeside Estates. He accepted the position of interim HOA president, ensuring the community didn't collapse under the chaos. His first act was to suspend all emergency regulations passed by Patricia. His second act was to institute a transparency program that required any new rule to be reviewed and approved by a majority of homeowners through a verifiable process. Once the dust settled, I realized my drama with Patricia had, ironically, led me to meet more neighbors than I ever might have otherwise. Many confided in me how they'd silently suffered, paid arbitrary fines, or even sold their homes at a loss just to escape her oppressive tactics. They were grateful that someone finally stood up. In turn, I felt a deep sense of belonging. We'd collectively reclaimed our community from someone who manipulated the system for personal gain. A few weeks later, I saw a note from Linda, Patricia's grown daughter, who lived out of state. She wrote apologizing on behalf of her mother, admitting she'd been suspicious for some time about where all this new money came from, but never imagined it was so extensive. She was mortified yet somewhat relieved that justice had been served. Reports soon confirmed that Patricia faced up to a decade in prison if convicted on all charges. Rodriguez, being a higher-level target, risked even more, given the broader smuggling ring. Meanwhile, local news outlets had a field day with the story. They presented me as the tech-savvy homeowner who refused to be bullied and ended up uncovering a massive criminal enterprise. At first, the attention was overwhelming. Cameras appeared on my lawn. Reporters asked to interview me. Tom joked that I should run for mayor. I politely declined, preferring my quiet coding life. But I couldn't deny the sense of vindication. I'd come to Florida seeking calm after a stressful divorce. Ironically, I found an entirely different set of problems. Yet, out of all that chaos, I emerged feeling more grounded than ever. The next time I took my chaparral onto the lake, it was a perfect Florida morning. The water lay calm. The sunlight glinted off gentle waves. Birds hovered overhead looking for fish. I set the boat adrift, leaning back in a fold-out chair with a chilled drink in hand, appreciating the peace in a whole new way. That short moment of calm was a powerful reminder. Sometimes you have to fight for your freedoms, even in a seemingly safe suburban community. Tom joined me out on his own small fishing skiff, and we drifted side by side for a while, joking about how a petty HOA dispute could lead to an FBI crackdown. Then a new neighbor paddled by in a kayak, greeting us with a friendly wave, remarking how nice it was to live in a place that had cleaned up leadership. I smiled, raising my drink in a silent toast to how drastically life can change in a matter of weeks. Karen's downfall became a symbol of triumph for the entire neighborhood. Fences got repainted and mailboxes were restored to whichever color their owners preferred. The intimidation factor vanished. Neighbors started greeting each other more warmly, organizing barbecues, sharing tips on home improvement without fear of retribution. Jenny stepped into a more prominent role in the HOA administration, working with Tom on restructuring finances. The community discovered that thousands of dollars that should have gone into road maintenance or landscaping had instead been lining Patricia's pockets. Now, the funds would actually be used to benefit the residents. I found it simultaneously funny and surreal that I, the guy looking for a quiet place to nurse personal wounds, had helped catalyze such sweeping changes. One morning on a whim, I brewed an extra pot of coffee and walked around the neighborhood, chatting with folks, raking leaves, or washing cars. Every conversation seemed to circle back to how relieved they were to be rid of Patricia's manipulative rule. People called me that guy who got the FBI involved. I laughed it off, never forgetting those harrowing moments of feeling powerless when I first realized my boat had disappeared. Victory tasted sweet, but it had come at the cost of many sleepless nights, frantic phone calls, and nail-biting decisions. Not long after, I learned that the stolen Renaissance painting, seized from Rodriguez's van, was indeed priceless, one rumored to have vanished from a European museum years prior. Agent Chen told me privately that the successful bust in Lakeside Estates helped link Rodriguez's operation to an international smuggling network that had been eluding authorities. My boat, in effect, functioned like a Trojan horse, luring him into a trap. That thought made me shake my head in amazement. A petty HOA fight revealed a global black market syndicate. It's funny how life works sometimes. In due course, legal proceedings against Patricia moved forward. She frantically attempted to negotiate, hoping to reduce her sentence by offering information on other associates. Yet the case built against her was extensive. Countless homeowners testified. Extensive financial records proved embezzlement from the HOA's budget. Multiple pieces of incriminating evidence showed her direct coordination with smugglers. The last I heard, she struck a plea deal that would still keep her behind bars for a long stretch. Local rumor had it she was devastated, though unrepentant, still blaming others for her predicament. Meanwhile, I was able to exhale. My boat was once again a source of weekend relaxation rather than heartbreak. Admittedly, every time I saw the new leadership team in the community center, I felt a surge of pride. We'd pulled off a genuine revolution in miniature form. With Tom in charge, violations weren't used as a weapon anymore. Fines became a last resort. People felt safe planting flowers in their yards without fear of some petty complaint. The entire place felt rejuvenated, as though a dark shadow had finally lifted. A few months after the dust settled, I saw an unfamiliar SUV pull into Patricia's old driveway. Linda, her daughter, stepped out, accompanied by a real estate agent. They locked eyes with me from across the street. She waved hesitantly. I returned a friendly nod. Later that afternoon, she knocked on my door, visibly uncomfortable. She only stayed for a few minutes, apologizing yet again for her mother's actions. She said the property was being sold to help pay legal fees. I sensed the embarrassment in her voice. We parted on a polite note. Part of me felt sorry for her, though I also recalled the havoc her mother had unleashed. Not everyone recovers from a scandal of that magnitude. Weeks turned into months, and my daily life returned to something approximating normal. My focus shifted back to writing code, finishing projects, and occasionally meeting up with Tom for casual fishing trips. Sometimes we'd joke about starting a YouTube channel dedicated to crazy HOA stories, but then we realized we were living that reality ourselves. I decided to keep a personal journal of everything that happened, from the day Patricia first knocked on my door to the culminating FBI raid. That journal eventually evolved into the outline for this very story, which I'm now sharing. If you're dealing with a Karen in your neighborhood, or if you live under the thumb of an overreaching homeowners association, perhaps my experience can offer some hope. Don't let them scare you into silence. Stand your ground. Gather evidence. Find allies. Sometimes justice takes unexpected routes. In my case, it was the synergy of personal frustration, an old policeman's sense of honor, a skilled accountant's ability to follow the money, a spooked HOA secretary's conscience, and an opportunistic friend who pretended to be a buyer. That odd ensemble banded together to topple someone who thought she was untouchable. Even now, while I relax on my boat each weekend, I marvel at how swiftly fortunes can change. One minute you believe you're living in a quiet, gated paradise, and the next you find yourself starring in a crime thriller with federal agents and international smugglers. I will say, though, it taught me never to underestimate the power of a single, determined voice. I also learned the importance of verifying the legitimacy of homeowners associations. Some are perfectly fine, but others can be prime breeding grounds for petty tyrants who exploit the rules for personal gain. By the way, if you're wondering what happened to the illicit ring that Rodriguez was part of, the FBI's follow-up investigation led to a warehouse raid in Miami. They discovered more stolen artwork, contraband, and forged documents linking smugglers across multiple states. That entire network came crashing down thanks in part to Patricia's arrogance. It's funny to think how her reckless craving for power and profit triggered a massive law enforcement victory. Throughout this journey, I faced moments of profound anxiety, especially when the boat vanished, or when I feared Patricia might retaliate violently. There were days I second-guessed my decision to fight back, but then I would see how many people she had bullied into submission. It felt morally necessary to stand firm. I'm not one for grand heroics, but knowing I had the tech skills to track my property and the knowledge to outmaneuver her made me feel obligated to act. And once Tom got involved, it seemed we had a real shot at dethroning the queen of our little fiefdom. In the end, that's exactly what we did. Patricia's arrogance was her undoing. She had grown so accustomed to intimidation and forgery that she overlooked the possibility of encountering someone with a determination to poke holes in her empire. By forging those bogus meeting minutes, she inadvertently gave me the perfect opening to scrutinize every piece of paperwork she touched. By stealing my boat, she turned a civil matter into a potential grand theft, drawing the attention of investigators. By openly bragging to my undercover friend, she created an avalanche of incriminating testimony. It's like she handed us every piece of the puzzle, confident we would never assemble it. But we did, and the outcome was spectacular, an FBI strike that left her handcuffed and humiliated, while the entire neighborhood breathed a sigh of relief. Now, whenever I see a flashy story about an out-of-control HOA or a neighbor from hell, I smile knowingly and think, been there, done that. If you're in a similar predicament, please remember that you do have options. Check your local statutes. Talk to law enforcement if you suspect criminality. Keep records of every suspicious interaction. Bullies like Patricia thrive on secrecy and fear. They bank on people not fighting back. Yet, if you muster enough resolve and gather credible evidence, you can tip the scales of justice. 2 days after my boat got seized, the FBI took hers. That's the short version, but the details laid out here show how complicated it was. How many moving parts coalesced into a single moment when everything unraveled. Part of me still finds it surreal that a small, seemingly irrelevant violation about the color of my mailbox was the crack that eventually revealed a criminal enterprise. Life sometimes feels like it's scripted by a writer who loves plot twists. If you enjoyed hearing this story, please remember to like the video, share it with anyone who's ever had a run-in with a Karen or an overbearing HOA, and subscribe for more content that exposes the hidden dramas lurking behind manicured lawns. If you've got your own Karen tale, feel free to leave it in the comments. Who knows? Maybe you'll inspire the next big showdown. Meanwhile, I'll be out on the lake, relaxing aboard my reclaimed chaparral, sipping something cold and relishing the calm that I fought so hard to protect. Because in the end, defending what you love is always worth the struggle. And sometimes, if karma needs a little help, the FBI is happy to lend a hand.